when people talk about managers getting fired, and I think in the Championship we're guaranteed 10 new managers in the dugout on round one, and that's before we've made the assumption that Danny Roll is not going to be heading back to Sheffield Wednesday prior to round one. So we could have 11 new managers. And we often hear, oh, managers are all right because they sign a 3-year contract and then when they get fired, they have the whole contract paid up. And I sit there thinking, well, okay, I've had contracts in my life when I've not been self-employed where I have to give 1 month's notice or, people get put on gardening leave maybe for 3 months if they're lucky. Can you tell me the truth? Surely these million, billion-pound organisations aren't giving a guy a 5-year contract and then are in a position where they have to pay him the entire wage, 100% of what he would have earned had he been working for them?
The answer, Ben, is it depends. So if I think about some of the employment sports lawyers that I've had the privilege to deal with, if you are a football manager and you are sacked, you have an obligation to try to find another job. So if you are seen as not applying for jobs, then potentially your former employer might be able to say, we're not going to give you your full payment. If you do find a job, then potentially the remaining element, on a monthly element, the remaining element of your salary effectively terminates at that point. I'm aware of one club who at one particular point in time not only was paying for the current manager, but was paying each month 6 former managers. They were a bit of a basket case at the time, and they couldn't afford this full payment. So there are complications. So you do have this obligation to try to find yourself employment. And if that employment is paid less than your current job, then sometimes you might have a top up. Sometimes managers will go and they'll be sort of on glorified gardening leave. So when Pochettino was sacked by Spurs, he didn't have much of an incentive to find himself another job. It was the same with Graham Potter at Chelsea. He'd signed a 6-year contract on £12 million a year. They sacked him a few months later. He didn't really have to try very hard for at least 12 months. And also, it's a bizarre job. I teach for the League Managers Association, and one of the things I always try to communicate, because I sort of try to give them an understanding as to how budgets work and to how the finances of football works as far as cost control in the individual divisions. And all of the focus on a coach stroke manager is on their ability to manage the dressing room. But my view is that managing the boardroom is more important, because it's the boardroom who are going to sack you.
So is it legal, Kieran? If I hire you as the manager of Ipswich or wherever on a 3-year deal on X amount of money, but you get relegated, can I not put a clause in your contract saying, well, if I sack you after you've relegated us, I'm not paying you your full amount up? Or is it, yeah?
Yes, it comes down to contract by contract. Now, I don't know this for certain, because I've not seen the contracts and it wouldn't be privy, but I've certainly heard it from fairly senior sources. If we take the case of David Moyes at Manchester United, he had the unenviable role of following in the footsteps of Sir Alex Ferguson.
I think we call that a hospital pass, Kieran.
Yes. But Sir Alex was a big fan of his, and I believe he signed a 6-year contract. But there was a clause in the contract which said, should Manchester United fail to qualify for Europe in the first season, that the club only had to pay him up 12 months' notice, as opposed to the remainder of the contract. And if you go back to 2013-14, Manchester United played on the Sunday. I think this was sort of early to mid-April. They didn't have a great result. and that meant that they couldn't qualify for the Champions League stroke Europe the following season. And he was sacked 24 hours later. Because I remember having to go to Old Trafford, and Manchester United are very, I appreciate this is not a Premier League show, but Manchester United are a very, very prickly club, so they won't allow you to record AV on their premises. So therefore you have to go to the car park just outside Old Trafford with Old Trafford in the stadium, and we broadcast from there as far as our understanding of the rules concerned. So every contract is different. The manager needs an element of protection.
And Kieran, Manchester United would have more leverage in a negotiation than Charlton or Oxford would, yeah?
They would, but if the manager is good, then
manager wants to work as well, though. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and we saw when Graham Potter went from Swansea to Brighton, I think there was £2 million compensation. When Steve Bruce went from Sheffield Wednesday to Newcastle, which is probably the smartest thing that Dejan Chansiri has done in his race. Admittedly,
more from him later.
Yeah, but possibly. There's not a lot of competition.
And we think, Kieran. Sorry to interrupt. Mark Ashton has a gargantuan number on Kieran McKenna's head after last summer as well.
Yes, yeah. So there are clauses that protect and benefit the club, and there are clauses that protect and benefit the player. The manager, and those ultimately are private. Football is unique, I think, as an industry, in that we think as football fans that players and managers are public property and they belong to us, and we're entitled to know about the intimate details of. I don't know your salary, Ben. You don't know mine, and because we're English, we're so polite, we wouldn't dream of asking each other as well. But when it comes to footballers' wages and players' wages and managers' wages, it's open season as far as the media and discussions are concerned. Hi, it's Kieran Maguire here. Thanks very much for watching that clip. If you want to watch the full episode, click on the link.